It should be going any moment now. Okay. Yeah. So start over with the Salutrians. You were watching something about the Salutrians.
Yeah, well, this Paleolithic society, who were they were meant to be hunting the big animals in this eastern United States, 12,000 about 12,000 years ago, and they were defined by these particular types of stonework on their blades, which was like they were double fluted.
You want to you want to share the screen, show the audience what you're talking about?
I haven't got a picture of anything.
Gotcha. Okay. No.
I don't
Right.
think.
So these people were um, explain again. They were defined by how they chiseled their flint heads. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, they found these particular spearheads, which kind of defined their culture, and it tied them in. It tied them in with the um, a paleo culture from Southern Europe, apparently. Um, I've got something. I've got something somewhere on it here somewhere. Um, Semantic scholar. Um, yeah, the Clovis people as well. That was another description of their society.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I've just been looking through these semantic scholar articles at what any sort of latest development in this area are, because of course, uh, I think opinions polarising between uh, a completely China, well, sort of uh, East Asia occupation, um, of both continents, not North and South America, or was that were the first. I mean, I think there's evidence of actual humans in the Americas from 20,000 years ago, which is bang in the middle of the last ice age. Um, so there were, I mean, they must have had decent technology uh, to survive it, I suppose. And then of course we've got the megafaunal extinction during the Younger Dryas, which a lot of researchers are attributed to the Clovis man wiping all the animals out, uh, and I don't really see that, but myself uh, as a great solution. You know, especially what you're seeing in the Big Lick and all that lot around your way, just piles of animals that have been killed.
Right.
Um, um, but yeah, the thing that I'm looking for is if if there were sort of Norsemen antecedents along that eastern seaboard who were trading, um, uh, there are some references to possible that there's some DNA matching done, uh, and I think there's some possible references an Irish an ancient Irish connection with the with this DNA that's been found. Um, so I'm just looking at the see the thing about this occupation, the Clovis people is they had to have boats basically, uh, unless they were coming across the ice, walking across an ice field or across the Atlantic. Now I can't see there being well, there might have been a continuous ice field, but I don't know. I think they'd be better off with boats, even so. And I'm sure they'd have a system of animal hide boats or reed boats or some kind of boat anyway. So I'm just seeing what we've got to say about bones, boats, and bisons.
All right. Cool. Sean joined us. It's his
Hey, what's
first,
up, guys?
his
Yeah,
first time.
I was on a call.
Sean, have you met Nick
Yeah, I was
before?
I
Oh,
heard
hi,
you
Sean.
guys earlier in the week, and I downloaded that paper you were reading from, Ramon, because I didn't have that paper. You were talking about the plasma glyphs in China.
Oh, talking
The
about
Dow, yeah, I downloaded that paper. I was like, man, I need that. You know,
okay.
like I need that one. I'm kind of playing catch up with you guys, so
Yeah,
I'll listen in more than anything, you know.
that's fine. I just want to make. I didn't know if you guys had properly met or not.
No, I didn't.
So
Nice to meet you, Sean. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Oh yeah.
when you say you're playing catch up, you mean like you took a break from these studies for a while, or do you?
No. I just wasn't. I haven't talked to you guys because once the Electric View kind of split up, you know, um,
Yeah, yeah,
I just haven't talked with you guys in a while. I had these, you know,
sure,
and
absolutely.
listen. Yeah, man. Like,
Tell the audience about yourself, and what you've been up to, and all what you're about. You know, all that.
well, yeah. I mean, I was in the Electric View group with a bunch of you guys, and obviously, I call myself, you know, into the neo-Velikovskian catastrophism movement, if you will. Um, you know, my interests are absolutely electric universe, plasma physics, ancient history, reconstructing the past, and all the good nuances and exciting nuances of the movement. And well, first of all, I just miss talking to you guys, pretty much. You know, I
Yeah,
just
it's good.
recently,
I've missed you too, man.
yeah, it's
That's
been a minute.
nice.
You know,
Mhm.
I'm still researching, studying the whole ball of wax, if you will. But recently, Jim Wenninger did a video through a friend of mine named Jacob Berman. He has a channel called History Valley, and
Uh-huh.
there was a PhD physicist who supports another author named Richard Carrier. I don't know if you guys know who Richard Carrier is, but you could do a quick Google search, see what he's written about. And he's opposed to the Electric Universe. So my friend Jacob called me up and was like, "Hey, can you get somebody to come on?" And I'm like, "Probably." So I hit Jim up, and because I did a discussion with this guy, there's a video out of me and him having a discussion. I'm not going to debate a PhD physicist, number one, because it's going to turn into an argument. Number two, I'm not a scientist, so I don't have that same qualification. So I'm like, I'm going to talk to him about it and have a discussion, but that's all it's going to be. And then Jim came on a week later and did like a quasi debate, if you will, where it really was more of a discussion.
Yeah. Well,
But you know, the people,
Jim's a
yeah.
sweetheart. You know,
Oh,
he's not
Jim
real,
hit him. He
not real to
knocked him
argue.
over the head. He knocked him over the head though, because again, I knew where Jim was going to go, and Jim was like, "Well, plain and simple, the standard model of cosmology doesn't explain certain observations that we see. Just pretty much, that's it, you know." And he went into the Bessel function, and he went into was it Articulus cluster and some different nuances, the stuff that we've heard Jim present, you know, many times over. I thought it was a
Sure.
good discussion. Just a couple weeks ago. This guy doesn't want to debate anybody anymore with the Electric Universe because they think that we're a bunch of
That's a
lunatics.
shame because if you can get a hold of him, let him know that if he wants an actual debate,
Yeah,
pass my papers along. Actually,
yeah,
pass
yeah.
anything from the. You know what I have new is a paradigm shift
Okay.
comparison, and it has a chart actually on here. I'll share it. But give me a second to log in
I
and
think
share.
because remember I got your paper before where you outlined the history of physics and you put the theoretical side
Yeah, yeah,
right
but
into
that's
what
an
we call
older
the
one.
applied side. Yeah, that was good stuff, man. That was really good stuff.
Well, thank you.
Um,
Give
that
me a
was
second
years ago now.
to log
Goodness,
in.
time is flown by so quick
It
from
has
from the
been
last from our
a minute.
last stages of the Electric View. And I've seen you also on Greg's channel, Greg J.
Yeah.
You and Richard doing some stuff here and there. But yeah, I'm not a scientist, so anyway, I kind of just talked with the guy, and I knew where he was going to try to go with me. But this guy came out right away. Planets and stars and suns, zero net charge, zero net charge. I'm like,
Oh, that's
okay, you
wrong.
sure about that? Okay. Well,
I got it wrong.
okay. And I would use the words they would disagree with you, or they would say this. I was pretty much using the electric sky as a reference.
Yeah.
And I even disagree with him because of I hate the fuzzy nature of the definition of plasma in the first place. That if you superheat a gas, you can create a plasma. And I'm like, okay.
Super cool it too.
Yeah, like, okay. Because I'm like, well, damn, we're getting into nuclear reactors at this point and trying to confine plasma. Okay, well, what about the fact that it already occurs naturally? You think that it happens this way because of the solar fusion model you have of the sun. And well, you don't really have to do it that way. Oh, Sapphire is not peer reviewed. He rejected it right away. And I'm like, well, damn. So these guys are just snake oil salesmen. They're just lying, right? They're putting their reputations on the line, and they're lying about it. And well, I'm like, well, damn. What about them getting patents on their equipment? That's kind of a peer review process within itself. Oh, that doesn't count. And okay, so they use
I
medium
think
temperature.
it's
Medium
quite
temperature.
it's quite interesting that that Sapphire Project takes this approach, because they're actually not bothered if they're getting any mainstream approval, and
No.
and these naysayers at the moment
No.
are just writing themselves out of the equations.
Right.
So,
And then, of course, they're going to react in a negative way. You guys just want the electric model, so Venus's tail shot lightning bolts at the planet. And I said, I never said that, man. I'm not. But then we talked about the comets. Comets have zero net charge. And I'm like, okay, well, then let's go to the Temple 1 incident and Wall Thornhill's prediction versus your prediction. I said, so they have zero net charge. I said, is the tail ionized? Well, part of it is. I didn't say nothing after that. Part of the tail is ionized, but somehow it still has zero net charge. Okay, no problem. We went and talked about that, the copper projectile, and I said, well, Wall did predict a double flash because of the charge that the comet's holding. And he said, no, what you saw there was the flash of the particles and the reflection of the sun, and the particles went everywhere. And I'm like,
all
okay.
right.
Yeah, like it just, I won't argue with people like that. But I'm like, okay, Jim came on and it was a good discussion. And, he said, I'll see if I can still get him back out of the shadows.
Okay. Sean,
because your name popped up too. Go ahead.
Is this sharing? Can you see it?
Yeah.
I'm on my cell phone. I'm not on my.
So there's two recent in the EPMC column itself, because I have a whole, I don't know if you know about the gateway yet.
Yeah, of course.
On the gateway, there's a directory when you click on EPMC itself, and there's a column that's dedicated to EPMC and EU. All right. So there's two new ones. There's one that talks about the first iteration, and basically last time we spoke deeply, it was still second. It was early. It was actually very early second iteration into first iteration, and now I'm in the third iteration.
Okay.
So just so you know, and then I did a paradigm shift because of Dr. Chahad had come on Thunderbolts and did a Space News paradigm shift. And so anyways, at the end of this paper about the paradigm shift, I do a comparison chart, and EU and plasma clearly beats out the heck out of standard model. You can see the standard model does just terrible.
Yeah, it falls apart.
In the set of topics. The EPMC does better than all of them because of the way it's designed, because it includes a lot of the EU and then works through. But the problem for these standard model people is that they have to hold together a boat that has holes all over the place. For example, saying that these bodies have no net charge is not supported by mainstream science anymore. I mean, this guy probably clearly doesn't know about the electric currents in geospace and beyond textbook put out by Wiley. He obviously has not reviewed Parad or anybody else's plasma textbooks.
No. Yeah.
there's no substantiation for what he said. Even the so-called black holes, which are no longer actually black holes, that's just a placeholder name they're using. But when they talk about black holes, now the black holes have charge too. So this guy is out of date, and what he is obsolete. Yeah. And you can tell him I said that. You can tell your friend that he can say that there's somebody writing papers and can prove that you're obsolete. And I am totally honest about that. I mean, I'm not saying he can't evolve. He can absolutely evolve. The standard model itself is evolving right now. But classical black holes have been debunked. They debunked them, not us. I mean, we tried for decades to debunk them, but nobody was listening to the alt stream. They ended up debunking themselves when they got out there with the satellites. Everything's coming out of those things. I mean, they got everything. The kitchen sink is coming out of them. Right. The X-rays, radio waves, gamma, baryons, the dust. Everything is coming out of them. There's nothing being stuck inside of them at all.
I'll share the video in our chat because I even asked him questions about, because he really wanted to talk about neutrinos, and I'm like, okay, go ahead. Well, your electric universe model doesn't call for neutrinos. I said, that's not true, but keep going. And he said, your model would produce gamma rays. Okay, I don't think so, but yeah, keep going. I wanted him to admit that when they did the neutrino research, there was like a 30-year hiatus because they couldn't solve the enigma of why their experiments weren't yielding the amounts that they were looking for. Right. Well, he moved the goalpost, and I said that to him. You just moved the goalpost and wiggled, and you're saying that you knew about the different flavors of neutrinos all along. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. It really doesn't make sense. But now you yielded a different result of your prediction from newer experimentation. That means it's wrong. I mean, that's just simple. It's pretty simple to me. If it's wrong, it's just wrong. But he wouldn't admit that. He kind of moved the goalpost, and it was more me questioning their methodology versus Don Scott's empirical method. Their methodology is different. So
do we think neutrinos are part of the ether? Don't we now? They have something to
I think almost assuredly.
Well, then, go ahead.
But it's probably only one of several particles of the ether, right? There's probably just one of several different light points. Right. The ether is going to be a domain of things. It's going to include baryons and neutrinos and things that are just really tiny that very clearly are precursors to the plasma state. But the real interesting thing is, how is the neutrino really mediating the interface between our reality and the void, or the counter space, as I prefer to call it now, because the void always associates with string theorists, which is really a shame, because it ought to associate with Buddhism, Taoism, but it's going to be associated with string theorists now and multiverse. And so it's better for us to start calling it the counter space, in my opinion. And I make it a point in this paper, this cosmic rearrangement hypothesis, that I think it's an absorbent or spongy. I call it spongy counter space. It actually absorbs of our.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So
that's a good way to put it. Spongy. That's yeah. I would say it's a good way to put it. Spongy.
Yeah, it's somehow pulling in heat and noise and all of our entropy, and then it's reverting, and that's the mysterious process. And the Chinese have talked about that forever. But this paper, the cosmic rearrangement hypothesis, does have a little bit of interesting things in it that might be useful, but particularly this is the page that you need for him to have, page 10, because it's mainstream citation after citation with the actual values and the velocities that are created by those values. Actually, it goes on page 10 to 11 now. So this cosmic rearrangement hypothesis, but I have it's a paired paper. It goes with this light is not a particle paper, in which I talk about light being a circuit.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, Ramon. So if I just want to put this in my search window, what do I put in? The pulse by itself?
Go to the gateway. Go to the epemcgateway.com. And then when you go to the EPMC tab, click on the tab itself, the directory is here, and all the general relativity stuff, that's where the light stuff will be. And then you have the dark universe debunking series over here.
All right, hold on. Wait, what am I putting in again? EPEMC.
gateway.com.
All right, that's what I need. There we go. See if I can do it
Yeah, this is the third iteration of the site, and Sean's
There we
been
go.
known me
All
as
right.
long as he saw the first and second versions.
now. Yeah, there we go. I got it. Now I got it. All
So
right.
when you click on the EPMC tab, it has the directory now of the papers. There's a few of them. You see the green ones over there, the new versus EU and the evolution paper. Down the bottom too, the peer review cult versus the skeptic, a true skeptic. That's a good paper, especially page 31's your, I call it Get Wrecked Conspiracy Facts page. It's link after link after link if you want to get that.
So okay, now I'm on the main page. What tab do I want to hit? The EPMC tab?
EPMC tab. Click the actual word. Don't drop down. Just click the word.
Okay, just click the word. Okay. And I'm on this computer down in my studio, which is
This
slow.
product
Came
about because everybody said they couldn't figure out which papers to start with. It's like,
Here
well,
we
just
go.
go by category.
Okay, here we go. All right, there we go. Down there. Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a library to go at there. To be honest, it's
Okay.
and it's good. It's all good stuff.
It's a funny thing that you use the word library. I want to remind the audience that under the AKHA tab now, we have all the archive newsletters from the very beginning of the organization to now, and people need to know the AKHA had a member who was the actual guy who did the Chronos magazine, and his daughter informed me that the archive materials ended up with the people over at Thunderbolts through the woman that runs that, Susan, I think is her name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's where all the Chronos magazine stuff was. The guy who worked Chronos magazine was an ancient Kentucky Historical Association member. And of course, the AKHA is sort of taken over for an old alt stream organization called the Filson Historic Society, which was begun in the early 1800s by the founding fathers.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of history there, and it is related. So there is a library on here. Plus, you could search and you can look up like Searle or T.T. Brown or whatever, and there's information on these people. I just added Dan Winter, although Robert Ashcroft brought up a interesting objection. Apparently, Dan Winter was convicted of plagiarism and is unable to publish in the United States. I want to say first and foremost, I don't agree that he shouldn't be able to publish. If I were him, I would go to the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, because it's a violation of his First Amendment rights. He should pay a fine, but it doesn't make him worse than anybody else. So he should be able to publish. However, that he was a plagiarizer, it brings up some interesting things. The question is, how much of his work is actually his own copy? Me, I cite everything. I got so many citations, it's almost out of control citations.
Right.
But that's because I would rather, put it out there and make sure the person can get to where it is. So many things are disappearing from the internet. It's also a good thing to have a catalog. I'd like to bring that up. As a matter of fact, this EPMC tables and figures PDF here, I'm going to open this up and show the audience. It's not really for you guys. This little segment is just for the audience. So first of all, this was up to 2019. So I've written a lot of papers since then. Look how many tables, look how many figures. I'd like to point out that even up to 2019, these are the kind of level of references that the Electric Universe / EPMC can pull from. So it starts here on page 226, and it just keeps it going. And it's alt stream and mainstream, both. And it has the title and it has the links. And look how it just keeps it going all the way to page 39. Okay. 400. It was so long, I told my assistant I wasn't going to make her do an updated one for the last 3 years, because it was almost like it drained the life out of her to have to type up take the links out of the footnotes and put them in here. But we have citations. The problem is the standard model mainstream people don't want to acknowledge how legit we are. So you can take this video comes out and he can hear my words saying that he's obsolete. I don't remember his name. He was a PhD. I remember I saw the video.
Aaron Adair. Yeah, Aaron
Adair. Okay, you can show him the video. You can show him what I've said here. You can show him the list of citations. You can show him everything. If he wants some, he can come get some, and we can have a real debate.
Right.
If he wants to have a dialogue, and I can inform him, and we can talk about the electric currents, geospace, and beyond. The problem is that when science makes somebody obsolete, like Einstein became obsolete, but the science couldn't really progress until he passed away, in all honesty, because while he was alive, the people had to step around his ego. And it wasn't necessarily he was a bad guy per se. I don't know. I mean, it depends on how much plagiarism he did of his wife. He definitely didn't stand up for his friend Velikovsky, and he avoided Tesla. So, the question is, how good a guy could he have been? Ultimately, he wouldn't work with the quantum people. And that led to them acting crazy. So that wasn't good for the science. And he caused the end of the Enlightenment, to be honest with you, in 1927. So I don't know, but I don't think it makes him a bad person per se.
Right.
But it happens a lot in the Amazon subject. There was one particular archaeologist, and I forget her name, but she squashed all discussion of Amazonian cities. And now that she's dead, they're able to do all this catch-up work because they have all those earthworks popping up and all these signs of dark earth and growth. It's very obvious that there was a hidden civilization. And after what happened in the Yucatan, where they found a city that held 1 million to 2 million people, couldn't even see it until they had LiDAR on it.
Right.
They now know that it's quite likely, almost assured, that there was a massive civilization there based on all the accounts of the locals and the Spaniards. But until she died, no one was allowed to talk about it because she would have run them out of the field. She would have ruined their careers. Essentially, she would have pulled a Shapley. And Harold Shapley was a monster. I mean, he was an absolute monster. He's out of control. So, I don't say that he's obsolete because he's a bad person or because he can't evolve. He absolutely can evolve, but I don't think he realizes how far the cosmology's come. First of all, we're older. I want him to hear this. Okay, so I hope he's still listening when he finally, if he even gets this far into the show. Our cosmology is older. Gilbert wrote De Magnete 80 years before Newton. And of course, there were electromagnetics experimenters. We'll leave out the original Egyptians who built the Great Pyramids. We'll just go with Cleopatra. We'll go with the Chinese and the South Pointing Chariot. Okay, that's been around forever. And then as far as plasma, there was early work with plasma in the early 1800s when they started doing spectroscopy. And then you had the plasma work of Christian Birkeland. Well, he's before Einstein. So Big Bang is an anomaly. Big Bang came about, 1927, and it's the anomaly, and it's already debunked itself several times. I remember the whole expansion theory era. They tried to get everybody to switch to the expansion theory until the show Big Bang came out. And when the show Big Bang came out, nobody wanted to say expansion theory anymore. So they kept the idea, but they were already admitting that the Big Bang doesn't work. Right, because it wasn't expanding the same amount in every direction.
Right.
So, serious problems with the Big Bang theory. The idea that they were like, we got to get away from this kinetic explosion idea. Yeah, you do, because it didn't explode, and stars can't perform work on themselves. A guy just gave a speech at the Royal Institute, and he starts the video by saying that stars generate energy through fusion. That's incorrect. Fusion is occurring because of plasma electromagnetic processes and pressure gradients that are happening at the surface of the sun and the interaction between the outside of the star and the inside of the star. And it's the fusion is a byproduct of the plasma interaction. So, I hope that he can evolve, and I would love to talk with him if he's willing to.
But it's tough though, Ramon. I mean, I had the discussion, and I wanted him to admit that they broke the standard model of physics with this neutrino issue. They smashed the standard model of physics into pieces. There is no model anymore. I mean, you got grad school students that are like, what model are we using now? What model is it? He's not going to admit that. And I told him it's all about paradigm and his worldview, and he just didn't agree with that. I'm like, well, sure it is. You're a uniformitarianist. I mean, that's the way you see things.
Right.
You see it from that vantage point. So
let's
it
talk
is
about
paradigm.
Let's talk about uniformitarian for the audience. So tell them about a uniformitarian versus diffusionist, and describe
the uniformitarian principle. It's Lyellism, I call it, Lyellistic, Darwinistic way of thinking that we have a 4.5 billion year old solar system or universe, and the sun has to be burning that long in itself. So they have to work a model to account for 4.5 billion years. And slow processes over just long, vast periods of time. It's the uniformitarian principle. To put it in a nutshell, things happen over, and I think was more of a pushback against the church at the time, and it wasn't done with intellectual integrity or the most intellectual responsibility at the time.
How much do you reckon it was the desire of atheists to utilize Darwin, despite Darwin's own feelings about religion and God, to sort of whack on the church and escape that, and then just come up with this idea that separated science from God?
I mean, I think just what you said is how it works, because I think at the time the the church movement, whether it be Protestant or Catholicism, it's oppressive. From the history that I've read about it, well, damn, if the church has that much authority, then science had to make a separation between them and the church that was really separate. I mean, they really did a step back and push back against it. But by doing that, now it creates a conundrum and a problem. And you guys would know that are EU people. Now we have to look at the geological features of the Earth and extinction events, and put a huge gap in between where human beings are and some of these events. So it just kind of it spaces everything out to whereas the young Earth and creationists, if you will, don't have a leg to stand on scientifically. With the with their way of looking at it, it's just magic, if you will. And then the scientists, well, we can explain everything now. See, what happened was 4.5 billion years ago, and there goes the story. Their story is going to be about big bangs and expansion, slow evolution over long periods of time, which still, to me, I think I may have asked him because he talked about gravitational accretion. And I said, well, we never seen that before. Well, I know we haven't seen it, but I'm like, okay, well, then I don't think I asked him, well, how hot would the planet have been whenever it was created, if you will? Would it have been hot? Would it have been cool enough to support life? I mean, if it's too hot, it's not going to support any life at all. If it's too cold, won't either. So I couldn't really get him into that square. I was trying to use a little bit of psychology to not ruffle his feathers. He got upset anyway after a while. But again, he couldn't see the fact that his paradigm is based on uniformitarianistic viewpoint, a Lyell-Darwinistic view. So that he's always going to have a reason, again, for the sun to shine for billions of years. He just couldn't see it. He couldn't see it. He just couldn't see the Lyellistic viewpoint was probably incorrect.
Since you brought up, I also need to mention that there is a new Shamash opinion editorial. It is marked as opinion editorial about our previous star. There are some gravity and magnetic anomaly work that's going to come out in the Plasma Electromagnetic Sky Part 2, which will then lead right into my Ashes of Atlantis debunking of Zamora. But in this paper, I just went ahead and included, what we've seen so far. At the end of this paper, or towards the end, I guess it is, there's an electrogeology table in which I combine where we currently are and the best links that I could find for all of the work that's been currently done for the most large and important sites. And so if you need reference to that, this page 10 could be also very handy. The Shamash op-ed paper is on the right in the miscellaneous category.
Okay. So, and I'm just kind of interacting with you because I didn't show you guys the video I did with this guy, and I played possum a little bit. And if he hears this, he's going to be like, We were talking about upheaval domes and then the Richat crater and the Stringer craters that goes up towards the
right. You brought up the upheaval dome. tell about the upheaval dome.
Well, the upheaval domes, in like the ones out in the Midwest, they're going to say, which is essentially a crater. They're going to say that there was a volcanic erosion over long periods of time that created these craters.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a long time ago, people may have thought they were impact. So I said, I think Richat was probably impact. And he said, no, you've never read this stuff. I know you've never read it. And I said, well, it looks like EDM to me. And I told him what that meant, electric discharge machining. If you sit the recharge crater right next to an electric discharge that's done in industry, and you both photos are black and white, you can't tell the recharge crater from the electric discharge machining process. You can't tell one from the other. So if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And he got kind of upset. But it's back to that again. That these domes eroded over long periods of time, and this is how we get these marvelous looking structures. And I'm like, well, no, it looks like electricity would have caused something like that from what I've looked at and what I've researched. And well, he's not going to agree. And it's the same story we get with alluvial fill in valleys, where you have the geographic or the geological features of valleys. You'll have gravel and fill, if you will, that form the surface, and usually there's silt on top. Well, that's because in however many thousands of years ago, the ice caps melted, and I'm going to paraphrase it. Then sludge and mud kind of just seeped down into these valleys over long periods of time and formed these features. I mean, he's going to give a different, just a very mainstream way of looking at it, where it's like, well, it doesn't look like to me that at all. It would look like the valleys, like especially in Western Pennsylvania and in the Midwest United States. If you look at the strata, it looks like they were formed rather quickly and through an electrical process. You're not going to see it, or I'm not going to see it unless we look at the electric discharge way it functions. Like even Buddy, whenever he does the fractal branding, I mean, my goodness,
Yes.
it look the same. It looks exactly the same, but again, it's paradigm. His paradigm is gonna.
So here's a fascinating thing that's happened since you and I talked. There is another upheaval dome of a sort. It looks different than the one in Utah. It's called Hicks Dome, and it's in southern Illinois at the Garden of the Gods. And I know you remember me going to the Garden of the Gods and showing Lysigan stands, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I didn't know when I went, and the last time that you and I were on a show together, I didn't know that there was a dome there. And so when I got on Google Maps and I saw this, I was like, oh, there was an impact and there was an electrocomet explosion. Right. And so I went looking for, signs of this electrocomet explosion. So then I get into looking at the geology, and guess what they found? They were saying, like you said, that it was a volcanic thing. But here's what they did not find. They did not find a gravity anomaly. They found a magnetic anomaly. Yeah. So the evidence is mounting on our side. It's just that, again, if people are kind of out of touch with the most late up-to-date things that are happening, both in the mainstream and the alt stream, they're going to miss seeing the pattern, so to speak. And when they miss that pattern, it's not going to be easy necessarily to challenge previous thinking inside of themselves or outside. And I want to bring this up. I wasn't born in the alt stream. I was born in the mainstream. I grew up an atheist. I watched Discovery Channel, History Channel, right? I was raised completely by the system. But because I learned the lesson well, that you have to keep questioning and you have to look at all the evidence, then I was willing to question, what are the results really there? And when you find the PEM cosmology, it's just better. There's no doubt about it that it does a better job of explaining all of the facts and not only some of the facts. And that's a major problem for them, I think. And they I don't think they like that problem, to be honest with you. I think that they want to sweep a lot of it under the rug. And a lot of that they want to sweep under the rug is bad history, like bad blood, doing things to scientists, mainstream scientists, let alone alt-stream scientists, going after them, trying to silence them. I'm not ready to condemn Dan Winters because I don't know the specifics of his situation, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was went after the same way Eric Dollard was gone after. And when they get people who don't know in the audience who are listening, Eric Dollard's equipment they came in and took his equipment and threw it over the cliff down there at not La Jolla, but was down out. It's the base there off of. I live right by it. It's in San Diego, Point Loma. So they took his radio equipment, threw it down into the ocean to stop him from doing his work. So these things do happen, and they happen currently, not only in the past.
I think it's like mainstream news though. They're very scared to say anything in case they upset the apple cart for the pals. And so if they have an individualistic scientific approach to things, they're scared of again upsetting their peers. And when it comes down to it, all these observations which we're pointing out to these people, which eventually they accept and morph their language to accept.
But yeah, they change the language of it though. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. And after they've done that, and then it's given them time to think out their alternative little explanations and spend billions of pounds on simulations, basically.
Right.
That's how it appears to be working. So they're actually quite scared to speak to people who are willing to stand toe to toe and argue the facts with them.
That's correct. They don't like it very much. You look at Professor Dave versus Ben. Though Ben, as I've said in the new one that's coming out, the POS theory, like Ben is a cult. He's created a cult, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily all wrong about the direction of the science and solar forcing, electroquakes, all that's all correct. His micronova theory is for the younger Dryas. That's incorrect, and I can prove that it's incorrect. But he doesn't know any better because he won't read my papers because he's mad at me. But he's mad at me because I pointed out that Donald Scott said there's no magnetic reconnection. You just it boggles the mind how emotional that man is. But that doesn't mean though that he's wrong. And this Professor Dave character just wants to attack people. But when somebody goes back up against him, he's not. He couldn't come back from Robitaille's video because Robitaille.
Yeah.
He erupted him because one of them is a spectroscopist and the other one is an internet pundit.
Okay? Yeah, Robitaille annihilated him.
It was an utter dismantling. And you notice that Professor Dave never made a reply to that video because he probably went and looked up Robitaille and found out that this guy was behind the MRI device. So, an improvement.
They get spooky. I think it scares them, like when they hear things like, well, Sapphire did this, and then they transmutated elements. What? No way. It shocks people into them just saying, you know what, these guys are just a fraud.
Right.
No, they're legit guys. And they couldn't have done that. They couldn't have to use atomic hydrogen, dude. That was just like dope. Like, yeah, this is like, man, you know what I'm saying? They did.
And here's the other thing about it is that all these guys have a track record of being legit scientists for decades. Like none of them are young, right? Montgomery Childs is not brand new engineer scientist. So you can go and look at the past track record. And then when you watch the Sapphire, you can see the setup. These people know what they're doing, what they're building. They're far better engineers than I ever became or would be. And they know what they're doing. So to sit there and say that they're not science is extremely fraudulent. And I think it borders on character defamation and slander. And that's why Professor Dave is one of course, my main knock that I'm doing is Carl Sagan. But, the entire lying liars lying is a huge problem in our society, and that includes in the scientism community, especially in general. Science community has always had a problem with I don't know how you say people that don't necessarily have scruples, data manipulation, all that kind of that still exists, and I don't think anybody's going to say that doesn't exist in the alt stream. It absolutely exists in the alt stream, and it probably exists all the more because not because of the lack of the peer review process, but because ultimately the grifting is the only way these people can make money. And I hate to say that, look at Derek Dollard. I mean, he was starving and homeless until anybody helped him to set up. So he was the only one willing to be just absolutely broken, destitute, just so he could be right. That's not an easy life. And, there's no rewards. There's no royal institution come to give you a grant because you're, trying to find free energy device in your garage. And so it creates a condition where and who is responsible for that condition? The mainstream. The mainstream creates the elite. They create the cliques. They create the power structure that they reconstitute only for themselves and their best friends. And if you're not in the end, how did Michael Shermer put it? He said the Electric Universe people weren't even on the bus. Well, guess what? They don't want to be on your bus because your bus is going over a cliff.
No,
right?
no.
Your bus is broke down and it doesn't work. So yeah, we don't want to be on the bus. They don't want to be on the bus. It's sadly though, of course, that the cost of that is the audience reach is far less. Bill Nye can come out and say anybody that questions the Big Bang is a loony, and so many millions of people will just trust that without thinking about the lack of quality of skepticism that he's providing. And I'm not saying Bill Nye would say that, but I'm just saying that kind of thing happens all the time from him, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Zahi Hawass. Zahi Hawass didn't even know what Göbekli Tepe was, and this man's trying to tell everybody that ancient Egypt is the first civilization. It's but he won't admit that Baval's dating is correct. So you can't have it both ways, because the dating for your Egypt, Zahi, is younger than Göbekli Tepe. So which is it? It's a serious problem. It's a serious problem, and the only solution is confrontation, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the way it works. I mean, I don't like passive aggressiveness. I think Dave is a passive aggressive person. It seems like this guy there is a bit passive aggressive, and he gets really upset. He was closing his eyes when I was talking to him and breathing deeply. Dude, I mean, we're just having a discussion. I'm gonna push the buttons. I know which buttons to push. I did push his buttons. The move the goalpost is me saying you falsified. Your stuff's falsified, dude. I mean, yeah, the kick is up and it's no good. No, it's good. You just move the goalpost over, or the car goes off the road and you build the road where you think the car is going. The car's already off the road, dude. It's off the road. It's way off the road. So
yeah, it's a serious issue where until we develop more, I'm not going to say spine, but do like you did. And you gave him the what for, and he didn't like it very much because they want you to agree with them no matter what. It always goes back to that Rupert Sheldrake versus that other guy in the debate. And when the guy wasn't able to defeat him, he turns to the audience and then basically slanders Rupert Sheldrake without using his name. And he talks to the audience like, we're all in this together, defending ourselves versus this thin man.
Daniel Dennett, not Daniel Dennett, was it? Daniel Dennett, wasn't it?
I think it was.
It was. Yeah, he makes a religion out of atheism.
Absolutely, it was an atrocious display. Whereas, of course, you guys know Rupert Sheldrake. He's a passive, just kind of plain spoken, not aggressive person at all, and he just presents his side and
peeled him apart again. Peeled him apart.
Yeah, but
quite
then
funny.
The guy
got
angry.
To watch it.
He got angry and he attacked him without directly attacking him, because then he would have lost the audience, right? And so the position has become more important, and optics have become more important than the truth, and that's really dangerous. That's a dangerous situation when the optics and the narrative is more important than the truth. That is exactly like the Spanish Inquisition and the Jesuits. That's not a good thing for science.
Well, their science is one of skepticism. It's one of hiding any excuse you can to say that there's no kind of spiritual interaction in anything in
Right.
thought in well, they just couldn't describe any of the phenomena, really, could they? In that, with their paradigm, they call themselves realists, don't they? Materialists, I mean, materialist skeptics. So that's where they are, really. They're just in a very mean, self-enclosed world, and they're trying to drag everyone else into
Right.
it,
It's
who's
dead, it's
obviously
dark, and dying, according to them, right? It's dead, dark, and dying. And we
peak
refute
death.
that
Yeah,
because everything's connected and electrical. Now, you bring up an interesting point that make me think of this thing. When we grew up, when all three of us grew up, we didn't realize, of course, we had heard that there were millions of species. Look at how the internet has revealed. People see new species every day. They're like, I never heard of that. I never saw that before.
Yep.
How
Yep.
often, how long had the mainstream kept us thinking about the same, few dozen species, maybe 100 species, and you lose the connection because then they're able to sell you this disconnected evolution. But when you really go and look, the interconnection between species that aren't even in the same kingdom, let alone phylum or genus, is astounding. The getting away from pure competition as the source of evolution to where you start
symbiosis.
thinking
These are communities of life,
communities,
communities
they
that
work
depend
together.
upon each other.
Yes, they're completely codependent and they co-evolve, and the only way is that they're communicating, but they're not communicating. Obviously, they're not making committees. Okay, you're going to do this with your stem, and I'm going to do this with my, gathering pollen. That doesn't work that way. So how is it being mediated? It has to be mediated by some force or some connective medium, and the only explanation I can think of that would be the PIM, because it ain't going to be gravity. A bee doesn't care about the gravity when it comes to am I going to use this orchid or this lily, and I'm going to evolve at this certain length proboscis in order to get in there. I mean the orchid bee specifically needs a specific kind of orchid in order, and it falls in and it gets covered in this waxy substance that then it crawls out a hole, and that's where the pollen is deposited so that it can go to another orchid and do the same thing. I mean, it basically purposely falls in. I mean, I don't know if it knows it's going to fall in, but it that's what happens. It goes crawling into this orchid and falls in to this substance, and then it gets coated. And of course, if it already has pollen, now it pollinates that flower, and then it crawls out and gets new pollen. It's astounding, and the bee is absolutely beautiful. It's iridescent and highly reflective. There is something really fascinating that is happening with all of this, and it is not explained by a gravity universe. Period. On any level whatsoever, it can't be explained that way.
That's kind of what this guy there was saying in this video, not the one that Jim did, the one that I did. Electromagnetism plays this teeny tiny role, and gravity is super dominant. Versus what we're saying, well, no, electromagnetism will play the dominant role, and gravity would be on the weaker end of it.
Correct.
It's just two different ways of looking at the same thing, and it's like, damn, I know why you're doing that. I even brought up Hannes Alvin to him, and yeah, I don't think he sees it that way. And I'm like, okay, well, good luck, buddy. You got your degree, and I'm sure you paid a good bit of money for it.
Well,
Damn,
they say there's no electricity in space because they can't see a generator.
Yeah,
Well,
there was just an article. There was an article a couple months ago about Saturn's poles, or at least the North Pole, that there is definitely a magnetic field that's being pulled by electric current to the poles, but they don't know where the current's coming from. Like, what?
Well, you can see the interaction, the aurora, can't you?
Yes. What do you mean you don't know where the charge is coming from, fool? I mean, come on, really? So you know the current is pulling the magnetic field, the magnetic field's around the current, but you just don't know where the current's coming from. I asked them these questions
a giant
about
mystery. Wouldn't you know? It's just a giant mystery.
Yeah, and I tried to ask him, even about the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, getting past the heliopause. Did they enter empty space? Hell no. It was the exact opposite.
Yeah, was it hot?
Yeah, like, are you kidding me? Like, okay, I don't know what planet he's on, and it's not to be disrespectful, but damn, I mean, and I have to say things sometimes in street terms. I'm not gonna let a person hustle me on the street. You can't come up to me and try to sell me a fake gold chain, and I'm gonna
Yes.
fall for it and buy it. So you can't
Yes.
I can't be ear hustled with science or anything else. I can't be ear hustled. It doesn't work that way. You can't. I'm not a fool, or damn. I mean, if you're wrong, you're just wrong. That's it. If your prediction is wrong, it's wrong. There's no going backwards, and you backpedal through steps and then say, "Oh no, we got it right now." But no, you didn't get it right. What do you mean you got it right? So either we're in empty space or we're not. But that's the problem. There's no such thing as anything being empty or empty space. That's like a axiomatic violation, like something that's self-evident. There can't be a such thing as empty space where there's nothing, there's no particles there, nothing at all. Like, it doesn't work that way, dude. You
Yes.
sure you know what you're talking about? Like, but we know that the solar winds, what they call the solar winds, are there. I don't know. We don't agree with the terminology, but it's there, and it's like, okay, but you're getting the solar winds or these charged particles. How's that happening again? From
Let me ask you,
asking
did
the
you ask him
question?
about
Damn.
did you ask him about how the dark matter, half of it turned out to be baryons? Did that come up?
I didn't say that. I just said, I just went to the basic argument with dark matter. Damn, I mean, so the galaxy rotational curves don't match the standard model. So what do? You make something up. I mean, damn, it's pretty simple. And I talked about Peratic.
Well, the reason I bring it up is that, again, hopefully if he manages to make it through some of this, imagine he might get to this point and then go look that up, because I'm betting he doesn't know. Again, a lot of these, they aren't on the, if they don't follow somebody like Ben, who's just constantly going over new papers, not that Ben understands all these papers, but he's bringing them up. And we now have magnetic, ripples. They're measured just on the outside of the Earth. We know that the Earth's atmosphere extends out past the moon. There is no. How is he even arguing about the electricity thing? Because Enceladus to Saturn and Io to Jupiter and Earth to the Sun have been mainstream measurements for more than 10 years.
Well, I mean, he painted a picture that we can't even have lightning on the planet. Listen to the video, it's like, well, damn, we're in a real sterile environment with the way he painted the picture. Zero net charge on the Earth, okay, right?
Yeah.
And he just painted he painted a vacuum that none of these things could even be possible.
Yeah.
I'm like,
it's a dead paradigm, and aside from being dead and it killing itself, it's trying to kill everybody else's mind too, and say, oh, our star's going to die. Well, if our star is going to die, or some comet's going to hit us in 4 million years or whatever, then we can just behave however we want, and then nothing will matter, will it?
I said that, like, oh my goodness, a black hole or the sun's going to burn out. I got a little silly. I even brought up the logical fallacy of appeal to authority. This is what he's doing. No, the electric universe is your authority. So, okay, I said, I'm going to look back at I already knew the answer, though, because the electric universe group knew about neutrinos before Jurgens even came up with the model itself. So they already know that there's a certain amount of neutrinos that do exist. And I said, I'm going to look back. I don't think that's in Dr. Scott's book. I said, I'm going to look back and then look at you guys' stuff. No, look at our stuff. I said, damn, like, he's pretty much telling me how to do research now. You're going to tell me how to do it. I said, that's appeal to authority. No, they're your authority. And I'm like, no, but that's okay.
Here's the issue. The people who discovered cosmic rays were not Big Bang theorists. They were just particle researchers. And those particle researchers, they tie their allegiances back to the quantum people, of course, and the quantum people back to the nuclear model people. And those people, all the nuclear model theorists, studied classical electromagnetism. Period. That was their locus center, right? And at that time, when the nuclear model was coming about, it was assumed that within a very short period of time that they were going to find a way to unify gravity back to the classical electromagnetism. They knew that it was going to happen. But then along comes general relativity, and wouldn't you know, we just can't find, and now that's what runs the world, the universe. The weakest force runs everything, and not the strongest ones, right? And that's dividing up, of course, the strong. And of course, you guys understand with me that strong, weak, and electromagnetism, the only thing separating them is the distance inside the chemical and the atomic interactions. That's the only thing causing them to be an order of magnitude different. But they had, at that time, they thought for sure that everything was going to be figured out within a 20-year period at most.
Well, I think what really is going to blow the lid on all this lot is because they'll realise that Jim Wenninger's idea is right, that we're not all getting sucked into the black hole in the in the centre of the galaxy. We're actually spinning around in vortices, and we're getting to the point where we can track which vortices we're on, and obviously. When we can show directly that we're flying past stars that are going in the opposite direction, various directions, various clusters going in the same directions, but not necessarily going towards the center of the galaxy or to a more stable point, appearingly stable point, but we're going to find that these spiraling paths that we're following are spiraling around other paths, and these are these are plasma phenomena, and there'll be no arguing against it when we can show which actual tubes, when we can start naming the tubes, differentiating the plasma, the circuit, and find out, which one see which ones we're traveling along, everything, and then of course with the James Webb Telescope coming out, and there's going to be billions of data to look at, so the sooner we can get prepared, the quicker, the better.
They limited the spectrum they were going to look at. That's my problem with it. But I mean, it is better than nothing. Here's the other thing, though, is that it's going to be such a small portion of the sky. They could easily miss some of the most important examples of what we're talking about. And that's another worry of mine, that they will purposely avoid looking at the ones that, quote, disappeared, or they were flickering, or the black hole disappeared, kind of situation.
Yeah.
The vulture, what was it, the vampire star, and that they'll focus on the same old places, which they are fascinating. Obviously, the Eagle Nebula, the Crab Nebula, these places are really fascinating. Crab Nebula can be very useful to us, but the question is, are they really going to give it the time, the option to look? I mean, I don't think that they have included all the equipment necessary to find what we want. So I'm very skeptical about that.
Real quick too, Ramon, he was like, oh, if there's electricity in space, it would destroy our satellites. No, it wouldn't, because they're shielded. Come on, man. That was dumb to even bring something up like that.
So he is denying the Van Allen belts and all the other electricity in space.
I mean, that's why I made this silly comment. It's not like this. You're in a satellite, and if we were to say the spacewalk or something, or like the ISS, you're gonna get zapped. No, dude, it's not. It doesn't even work that way. But I played possum again. That there's nothing that he talked about the devices now they can measure currents in space. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I do know that, and you can pull up a whole bunch of articles where they're measuring currents. They are. Are you kidding me? Now it's just like you're going to make an argument against what we pretty much know. I mean, damn, it's in the mainstream. Jim wanted to talk about some of that stuff, and it is in the mainstream. You can pull articles and find this stuff. It's not very hard to do, but they're not going to admit that plasma physicists or the electrical way of looking at the solar system is actually correct. They're not going to admit that. Not that way, anyway.
No, they're going to change the words. They'll call them flux ropes and dynamos, and they'll use magical names like sprites and stuff. The flippancy for which that they behave about all of this is deplorable. The whole reason they use the word sprites, and all the things from the
Orcs,
or all of that is because they were saying, oh, it may not exist. It was kind of a joke. And then when they started finding this stuff, they just went with it, you know, because it was cute. It's flippant. It's absolutely flippant. And even the word solar wind, we use it because we have to, because that's what people are talking about. But it's not a wind at all, more than it's an ionic breeze that comes off of a device that's demonstrating the Biefeld-Brown effect. It's not a breeze. It's, you know, they act like the object is lifting because there's wind coming off of it. No, where would the wind come from exactly? That doesn't make any sense. It is not wind. It is ionic action, and there's electric force, and there's repulsion because there are particles moving. You know, it's really kind of amazing the amount of chicanery that they get away with.
Because he said gravity is only attractive. Okay, cool. Glad you said that. Well, why aren't we getting sucked into the sun? And I knew where he was going to go, and he gave a real mainstreamish reason for that. And again, it doesn't really make sense to me. You know, come on.
Let's observe this. So if the sun was bending a fabric, which is arbitrarily just happens to look up and down just the same way we do, so it's bending this fabric. Wouldn't the Earth roll down the fabric into the center of this hole? The entire argument that they use is so mind-boggling and fallacious. It's dumbed down to try and help people understand. And I get that. I get that people need a visual example. They need a bowling ball in the middle of a fabric to understand. But it's probably because the idea itself is not very well formed.
Right. Operating from and I brought up about Eddington in the eclipse. There it is. Yeah, that the sun is a nuclear fusion power plant, essentially. Oh, that's not how it works. Oh, kind of does, though. Dr. Derry, you have to admit that.
There is no way for them to hold up their version of reality without the sun performing work on itself.
Yeah.
Period. And that's not possible in thermodynamics. That's just the facts. It's not possible in thermodynamics for the sun to perform work on itself, and it doesn't really make much sense anyways. I remember when I was a kid, they had this thing they would teach us in science, started in middle school. Nothing creates or destroys energy except in a fusion reaction. And you go, well, why is that the one exception? Okay, well, you just accept it as a kid because you don't have really the ability to argue with the teacher about it. Some smart guy named Einstein, whose a brain was found in a jar, and there's more connections between his corpus callosum and everyone else's, which turned out to be fake. But so all of this is told to you, and you just accept these very smart men like Hawking. Have they figured it all out? And black holes must exist, and they're the size of the tip of a pencil or a period at the end of the sentence, right? And then when you grow up, now it's suddenly the black holes have changed size, changed density. Gosh, they do all sorts of magical things. There could be one in the solar system right now. What are you talking about?
They're spewing out matter really fast. Like, okay, I thought they suck everything in. Okay. Never mind.
They said that it would feed. They said SGRA would feed on a giant gas bubble. That didn't happen. Then they didn't put out a paper saying, well, we made a mistake. They just let it be. It's just kind of scratch our heads. We don't know why it didn't feed, but it's a black hole for sure. Okay. And then when you really start looking at it, and you look at the money, which comes back to the peer review cult paper. I cover the entire fact check network, and not the entire, but the main ones. And I cover the journals and the journalism, and I cover the government contracts for a lot of these labs, like how much money they're actually making. By the way, the LIGO lab makes a lot less than I thought, to be honest with you. It's only millions, unless there's a lot of backdoor, activity. That could be possible. But it's just kind of that one surprised me. But a lot of these labs had connections, and some of them had connections all the way to Lockheed Martin. So the whole thing, it starts to make sense. The lies make a lot more sense, especially if you consider the top secret aspect of the weapons the weaponization and what can happen if you have the real science and everybody else has fake science, which I absolutely think that was the purpose of the Los Alamos. I don't think Los Alamos let Peratt do that work in a vacuum, right? They wanted something out of that work, and that is that they got the truth, and very few people else got the truth, right? So that's my personal opinion.
Well, now okay, there's another YouTube channel called Gnostic Informant, and Professor Dave, unless he showed the video he made before, it says Professor Dave explains electric universe and quantum mysticism. Now that video is on a couple weeks old, 1,400 views, and then the guy Dare did a video several weeks ago about electric universe on the same show. Well,
I can't wait to see this.
I don't know why I can't find it.
It was on. There's a bloke who's got quite a good following, Sean Atwood. He writes. He was in prison, and he writes a lot of prison kind of things and things about criminal activities and stuff like that. And Professor Dave was on his show, taking the piss out of the electric universe.
Yeah. He showed the Peratt paper, but it was like something you can get off the internet that just shows the petroglyphs and then some of the synchrotron experiments. But he kind of clowned it as if, oh, we're just going to explain to people about the past because they're the ones that did this stuff, but we're just so smart now, we can explain it. Dude, I told you to read that paper. When I was on the show, I said, if you haven't read this, you need to read it. But if you're going to take that route, then take that route. Then you're not looking at it as a serious scientific paper. You're just trying to clown it, because I think some people's agendas are to kind of debunk people that talk about the past. There's a lot of people that want to debunk religious minded people, which I think is wrong. And they just want to kind of poke at how people are reinterpreting or interpreting things that happened in the past.
Well,
I asked a simple question.
Give people a little background about you in terms of your studies of the Kemet and the Egypt, because this audience may not have any association with the electric view, right? So they may not know anything what you've talked about. So
just if you look at Velikovsky's work, and you look at Dave Talbot's work, or you look at Eduardo Cardona's work, or you even look at Eb Cochran's work, they're trying to recreate the ancient skies, essentially, and what ancient people were looking at as a shared experience, rather than in a real physical environment. Our real physical environment was different in the past, versus maybe Carl Jung's idea of ancient archetypes and myth came from the deep recesses of our mind, and kind of things that people created on their own, essentially. Or that, back to Velikovsky, that human trauma, as it's described by Sigmund Freud, happened when we're at childbirth, and pain we go through when we're born, and maybe through the first 5 years of our development. That's why humans are really psychologically unhinged. The Velikovskians, if you will, if I'm gonna use that word, they look to recreate what the past was like, to try to, I'm not using the word justify, but why did the ancient people come up with all these archetypes, ancient pictures and drawings of the sun, which look nothing like our sun today? Why were the ancient people committing acts of animal, human, and child sacrifices? That would just mean that people were evil from some people's perspective. Why did ancient people deify what we'll just call the sun right now, but then their description of the sun and how the sun was behaving is nothing like our sun behaves right now? Or when it rises with thunder, and it like when Ev Cochran was he did a video about that, the ancient Mesopotamian culture's description of the rising sun is violent. You know what I mean? It's not violent whenever the sun rises right now, but it's trying to give some
Well,
explanation to the past, if you will.
give us,
Right?
so I know that you've delved in, and so talk a little bit about some of what Budge actually said, the sun was like in the Egyptian times. Like, to give us a hint of that, because I know that you're very deeply studied
Yeah,
there.
and I have more of the new stuff from Eric Hornung. I mean, I have Budge's stuff, but I use Eric Hornung's translations, if you want to call them that. They're not translated from German to English. They're translated right from the Egyptian to the English. So I have an obsession with a deep obsession with Tutmos III's tomb. That story in Budge's work was called The Egyptian Heaven and Hell. And in Eric Hornung's book, he calls it the Book of the Hidden Chamber. Anyway, it's a sealed tomb, Tutmos III's tomb. It wasn't something that people could say, hey, I'm going to go visit Tutmos's tomb. That was sealed from the outside. But, lo and behold, and this is New Kingdom. I'm saying it right. I think it's New Kingdom. When you go inside the tomb, the story is on the wall. It's like the dopest story like I've ever seen. But it talks about the sun god traveling on his solar bark, if you will. But in the story, when you're reading the story, the setting of the story in the sky, because it does say this happening in the sky, absolutely makes that perfectly clear. That during this course of this story, the sun god, I'm just going to go to the 5th hour just so I can kind of talk about it. He's in a cave in this scene, but it looks like a cartouche, except the cartouche, instead of being vertical, is horizontal. Well, he's in this cave, and the cave is lit up. He's on a solar boat, but the solar boat has 3 serpent heads at the stern, and then 1 serpent at the bow, and then it's actually moving the stern first. The stern of the boat's moving first, but he's in this lit up cave surrounded by fire. And I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. And there's also water that's near this cave that he's traveling through, and it's lit up now. Remember, it's lit up. And there's also dry land in this story, sandy, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. And in this same story, a little before that, Isis, man, she's violent, man. Like, she has a sword in her hand, and she literally attacks the enemies of Ra, and cuts their heads off and puts them in chains and fetters, and it's like, what the, chains of iron, and it's a bloody, gory, story. You know what I mean? But it has to do with the ancient skies. And it's very peculiar that these elements of the story, are in the sky: fire, water, land. This cave is lit up. He's on a serpent boat. Seems very odd and peculiar.
Sean,
Yeah, go ahead.
doesn't the ancient Egyptian text talk about the sun standing motionless in the sky?
I think that was in the Popol Vuh.
And as well as the Sumerians talk about the unmoving mover?
I'd have to look it up, to be honest with you. No, I was intrigued with the story because I'm a big George Lucas fan. So I'm like, okay, if looking at Budge's works, the lightsaber and all this stuff comes from these stories. It's really intriguing, but nonetheless, to try to repaint that picture that they're giving us, well, there's all kind of interpretations by Egyptologists with this stuff. I mean, interpretations of, again, heaven and hell stories, kind of like we see in the Bible, and what happens after you die, things of that nature. Well, I never really accepted that. I never accepted an Egyptologist's way of interpreting these stories. But with the help of the Electric Universe principles and some of the books they've written, it starts to illuminate the story. It may make more sense. I'm on the side that says, well, damn, in this story, there's an interpretation in second hour of the Amduat where Ma'at is in a solar boat herself, and then there's a crescent with a circle on it, and this circle is said to be the moon. Well, guess what? When you look at the picture, it doesn't look nothing like the moon. Look at the circle. It's the Egyptian word for, Budge would say, placenta. It is a circle, and it has horizontal lines going down through it, which would to me look more like Jupiter. It would look much more like Jupiter, but it's interpreted as the moon. What doesn't look like the moon? So that's something that always kind of bothered me in Budge's work. And then now Hornung is translating it essentially the same way. Well, you know, Spot's on this solar boat and the moon is in the boat. That's not the moon. That doesn't look like the moon. The moon has craters on it. We know what the moon looks like. Everybody here knows what the moon looks like. Well, that's not a picture of the moon. So again, very intriguing. The Electric Universe writers, if you will, try to shed some light on these subjects, like Talbot's book, Saturn Myth, and even Juno Cook or John Cook's work about the Jupiter myth, we'll call it. Velikovsky's work about Jupiter, Saturn, or Jupiter and Venus. It sheds light on it. That maybe then again, you know, the ancient people were looking at a completely different sky and landscape and different planetary motions and movements. Where some would, like you said, I've heard you say, Ramon, it would be some sovereign deities or like fertility deities, but then there'd be the warrior deities. It don't seem like the people really like the warrior deities too much.
Yeah, I've
There's a
recently
lot to it.
come across something regarding this, and it's the original building of Stonehenge was meant to be a moon worship
Yeah.
structure originally, and the legend was that I came across that at that time the moon was a masculine deity, which is weird, but was a lover of Venus, and so I'm trying to dig some more of this out. Now this is pre 4,000 years BC, and I've got and at that point that Stonehenge changed its use to become more of a solar worship place. But originally it was there to send people off to Hades, to the and that was meant to be the direction of the sun in midwinter solstice, and that's where it pointed to. But of course the original circles what they've rebuilt aren't exactly what there was originally. These were built to reflect the shape of the moon, and one was and they were a moon clock when they were first built. So that's just a little addition I want to put into this. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting period though, because it could define more clearly. You see, this is the time when Doggerland sunk, and it's also around the time when the Black Sea formed. And I think there was a massive cataclysm going on um, in the in the Mexico region and probably the northern US. So it's an area I'd like to really follow quite. If you find anything, I'm interested.
Yeah, like well, I was obsessed with Egypt because they have a lot. They have a lot of art. I call it art. It, a lot more, it seems like, than some of the other cultures in the ancient times. So, and knowing that a lot of the foundation for a lot of the movies we watch comes from mythology. I mean, I had a obsession with it when I was a lot younger, but then as I got older, things weren't making sense. This is actually the story, second hour of the doo-wop, and there is the solar boat. I know you guys can't see it, but the translation, and it looks like the horns we see, or the crescent, moon crescent. It looks like a little statue, like this disc is on top of a statue, something holding it in place. Nonetheless, the translation is the head of the god forms against the stern of the last boat, while the prow is again cut off. The boat carries a kneeling god, supporting a huge ostrich feather, the sign of Ma'at, and a stand for bearing the crescent and disk of the moon. That's not the goddamn moon. Oh, curse. It's not the moon. It doesn't look like the moon. It never looked like the moon. It just doesn't look like the moon. Moon has craters on it. This isn't the moon. And then Hornung's supposed to be one of the best translators of this work. And I'm like, well, that's not translated correct. I'm sorry, but it's not. It can't be. I'm not looking at the moon. And that definition from Budge was a placenta. Just like city or town is the circle with the X in it. And we've seen that symbol in Mesopotamia and throughout the world, the wheel in the sky. That was city or town. Okay, fine. But it's still in mythology, it's in the sky. And there were
I've heard that's a Venus. I've heard the eight-spoked wheel is a Venus symbol as well.
This one is a just an X. It's not like a plus sign. It's just an
Right.
X, but it's still intriguing enough to where at least the Thunderbolts group shed some light on this subject. And I think there's still more research to be done. I'm going to definitely say that. I heard Ramon the other day talking about the Chinese symbols, and I was like, wow, that was really good
So
stuff.
many circles with crosses or X's carved into them worldwide.
Yeah.
By the way,
it's just I don't buy the Egyptologists, and I have so many supplements. I don't buy their explanations. I never have, but then we get more clues through the Thunderbolts works, and the authors that have written those books. We get more clues, and I still think there's more work that needs to be done to paint the picture a little more clear. I still think there's always room for more work, especially with what Ramon is doing. But anyway, the obsession with Egypt is still through science fiction. Let me see if I have the scene. Well, I have the book here. That's where because I saw the lightsabers. There was like they had these bunch of these people in this one scene had these swords in their hand, and then in the next scene, these swords are illuminated. You can see they drew lines around them, so you can see that these swords are illuminated. And that's, I was like, oh, there's the lightsaber. Well, why would these people have a story like this in the first place? That just doesn't. I'm like, okay, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I don't know why they would do that many years ago. What the heck? But then it's a bloody story though. It's not like a nice story. It's pretty gruesome at times. And I'm like, well, wow. Where did they come up with this, and how did they come up with this stuff? So well drawn too. It's very clearly drawn. It looked like stick figures. See if I can find the scene. So I'm just not blowing smoke, but because I have everything bookmarked.
Now, when was New Kingdom? When did that finish? 2,200.
This is definitely tested my brain. I'm about to Google. I've had so many conversations about different things over the last couple of months that some of the stuff I have to look it back up. It's approximately the 16th century BCE to the 11th century BCE. So about 1550 BCE to about 1200 or 1100 BC.
Right.
Before I forget, I just had an idea. It would be good for us to create a section for your Egyptian research on the Gateway, so it's easy for you to find again later, and you can also keep the audience informed about some of your, because people don't feel very connected to Egypt on account of the dead nonsense that's been taught to us. So they see it very foreign and very remote and very difficult to look into. And so I think that would be a very good project if we could put together even just starting with a spreadsheet, and then I could eventually migrate a lot of things onto the site.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of research too, and a lot of it's highly controversial, but it's say Charles Janathan, Gunnar Heinsohn's work. I just did an interview with him, and man, I mean,
I like his work. Yeah,
the BCE stuff. It took me about 6 months or more to wrap my head around it, of a new chronology for BCE times, based more on the Greek history and the stratigraphic layering in the ground. Sheds a lot of new light on just how the chronology of that time works a little different, then it would challenge the methodology then of Dave Talbot, who's part of the Thunderbolts group. To whereas if you're going to use the archetypes, you're supposed to go with the oldest archetypes and then work your way up to the newer archetypes, because the mythology will start to contradict itself. So how do we really know that the pyramid text even is the oldest text in Egypt, which is regarded as the oldest text? I don't know. I think we may have to look at all of it as a composite, and then don't look at it like, well, this came in 2200 BCE, and this came in 1800 BCE, and this came in 1500 BCE. To just look at the entire work as a composite. Same thing with Mesopotamia, same thing with even China, same thing with Rome, same thing with Greece, same thing with Mesoamerica. Just look at it as a composite within itself, and not necessarily from the standard chronology we're given in school and stuff from Bronze Age to Iron Age. And maybe that would clear some things up, I guess. It would definitely clear some things up.
Well, totally, and I think there are more and more links becoming evident of ancient Egyptian activity in the British Isles, notably in Orkney,
Right.
and probably Ireland. There are a couple of connections, but also it's now looking like Stonehenge and the complex down there, Avebury, were built upon. If you look at the pyramids, they're always down at the end of a processional avenue that meets with a canal running down it that meets the water, and this is how they transported the stone up to Avebury along these canals, and they're starting to now see that there are absolutely it's the same architecture, the same ground layout has been considered, and of course they give Stonehenge credit for earlier construction than a lot of the Egyptian stuff. They certainly, I don't think they were using polished stones or anything like that, as far as I can see, unless they've all been smashed up. But the actual groundwork seems to follow this ancient Egyptian model. So I think we can go a little further when we find out these alignments where they actually point at on the ground.
Julian West did a good job with that.
Yeah, I haven't got that sorted out on my computer.
It makes okay, because it's not to be controversial, it's not to infringe on anybody's belief system, but the biblical narrative is trying to paint a picture without pictures. So the language gets really tricky. And Julian has wrote a paper about this recently too, and he has the Jupiter myth video, and he compared the Hebrew heaven to the Egyptian Duat. That's what this is called, what I'm reading from, and the Mesopotamian Apsu, and that all the elements from the story from Egypt, sure, are still in the Genesis story. Whereas you have the deep, which is called the Tehom, and the Tehom would be the realm itself. But then when you look at the word heaven, it's a composite of two words, which is fire and water. Esh is fire, and Mayim is water. Read it together, it's Shmayim, and it should be read as Eshmayim according to Kabbalistic teachings. So when you read the Egyptian story, in this story and that I'm reading, in the land of the gods, called the Duat, the realm has land. It says the secret way of the land of Sokar. But then they also make a differentiation of the earth that you're standing on to see it. So they make a differentiation between this land that this God is dwelling in and the earth that you're standing on itself. See, the Bible doesn't do that. Word Eretz is used for earth, land, and it's used interchangeably to where we may paint the picture that this is actually the story of the creation of the material universe. But no, it really is the same story that's rendered in at least the Egyptian culture and the Mesopotamian culture would seem the Greek culture too, that has to do with something that people are looking at in the sky versus the creation of the material universe itself. And so I think the biblical narrative makes something that's already confusing more confusing, just because how the words are interchanged. Because I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, okay, the secret way of the land of Sokar, which Isis enters on to be behind her brother. It is filled with flames of fire from the mouth of Isis. And it says, the gods are blessed, the gods of the blessed, and the dead cannot proceed on it. The secret way of the land of Sokar, and the Westerners who tow this god, up upon which gods, the blessed and the dead do not pass. It is filled with flames of fire from the mouth of the Ormeni serpent. Head of torches, they are behind this god. What they have to do is to let the progress of his enemies go up in flames. The serpent whose head emerges as a baboon's head is crawling towards the oval. That's the cave he's in, which is lit up, by the way, and it's surrounded by fire. He lives by the voice of the gods who are on earth. So it already made a differentiation to the gods who are on earth and the land of Sokar. But the biblical narrative just used the word Eretz for earth, and it's like, or sometime it could be Adam. It kind of confuses it to me. So whereas if we're at least going to paint the picture, it is in the sky. We can agree on that. And in this story they're telling, there's fire, water, and land in the sky from their interpretation of this story. Whereas I think, again, the biblical narrative, you'll read it and you'll see the word earth and you're thinking, boom, right in my head, I'm thinking the planet Earth, when it should be this land that's in the sky. It should be the same. It should be the same story. Essentially, it's the same thing. It's just a different way of expressing it through different cultures' vantage point, but there are no pictures in it for us to be able to look at the pictures. It's just trying to paint the picture with words. And then when you look at the symbols in Egypt, it's like, well, damn, like I said, this doesn't look like the moon. Isis's mouth is just the it is the gift mouth. It looks like an oval. It's like really, really deep stuff.
Let me ask you a question. So when Ra, Shamash, Zervan, El broke up and formed the gas giants, there would have been extra plasma. We see this in Enki in the World Order. How long, based on the Egyptian stuff, obviously it changed shapes as gravity and electricity and momentum and charge moved it all around. How long, though, did this spirit world seem to exist up in the sky, do you think, based on what you read?
I don't know. That's
what you think about Laval. I don't know what you think about Laval's dating, but just free form if you want.
It would have to be, just for me using as much common sense as I can, it couldn't have been too long because the people would have to form language systems to even be able to express this stuff in the first place. It would have to be something that was fresh in their mind, I would think, to obsess about it the way they obsessed about it. My goodness gracious. It's very obsessive in Egypt. Like, it's just on everything. It's in coffins. It's in tombs. It's on walls. It's everywhere.
And it's formed the Rig Veda and the Upanishads. It's not a short period of time either, because there's obviously the main bodies themselves form the main gods, but there's all these other kinds of spirits and angels and demons and everything, devas, and they're moving about. And I gotta wonder, like these monsters, the three monsters of the Nordic tradition. You gotta wonder how long these formations, these shapes, were existent to shape what was the early formations of religion before we talk about proper religion, right? Like democratic religion.
3,000 years, as the Zoroastrians tell us.
3,000. I could go with 3,000. That seems about right. It's long enough to.
It could be,
cultural weirdness. We create cultural weirdness every day.
You remember reading some of that stuff that I gave you about the Zoroastrians, right? So it confirms it in there.
Tell the audience about it.
Go ahead.
Well, I can't remember the details. It was so long ago, but I do remember the fact that you had confirmed that it was a 3,000-year period that all of this took place.
Yeah, I would say 3,000 is a good conservative estimate. If we want to get liberal, you could even go 7,000 years. It's just hard to know what kind of material is hanging up in the sky, and how long Venus was electrified to where it actually looked like it had horns and looked like a cow. It's not exactly obvious.
Yeah, it's that is so intriguing because, again, I don't think. Okay, so the guys in the group, let's say Talbot and those guys say around 10,000 BC or so. So that means people had to remember this till the Bronze Age to be able to record it. I don't think it works that way. They had to have seen something, remembered something, been a part of it. It would seem like to me, well, damn, can people remember things that long and say, oh, we have to come up with a language to express it? But you're getting snapshots of it. You're not getting a full composite story either. It's like the story is telling you the best parts first. Because my goodness, even in the pyramid text, the creation myth of Atum isn't until the middle of the book. And I'm like, damn, you're kind of starting on this end of the story, like almost like Star Wars. You're starting in episode 4. And well, what happened in episodes 1 and 2 and 3? Well, you have to wait for that, later in years to even get that story. That story is wedged in the middle of the book. And I'm like, so Atum masturbated and he spit out Shu and Tefnut. Well, damn, that's the middle of the story. That's not the beginning of the story.
It hasn't made it onto any pottery. It doesn't seem to have made it onto any pottery. It seems to have gone a lot of glyphs on walls, but not particular pottery. Any comments on that? Because pottery is bloody ancient, isn't it?
You said any particular pattern? Is that what you just said?
No, the glyphs. For example, Homer talks about Mars and Athena battling it out on the plains of Troy. And I suppose you'd get some of those scenes on the Greek pottery, but do we have any scenes of comets flying over or waves or I just wondered if there's any other areas of information that could give us clues as more to date, because bear in mind, these artisans won't put them on pottery until they're stable stories that other people would recognise, so they I suppose there'd be a period of dissemination for.
It's also possible that they had an Emperor Qin-like situation where a lot was purposefully destroyed in order to, if you have a god like Osiris has been overthrown, it's possible that everything associated with Osiris had to go, or the world could end. That's a scary human behavior, actually, that we see in the Library of Alexandria when it was burned. That purgation idea, it's pervasive. My brother happens to be purging everything in his life right now. Of course, his job gives away everything, but his Chinese texts and some musical instruments is just kind of human nature. It makes you wonder how many things were smashed to bits because they had imagery on them.
Yeah, totally. It can happen easily, can't it?
Yeah, I'd like to get Sean's opinion on something else. Of course, I don't know, Sean, if you know this, but the cosmology at the end of the second iteration of EPMC and into the third, it sort of birthed the philosophy. And the philosophy is called MEMS. It means the membranous interface of the material and spiritual. In other words, it's sort of like continuing the Egyptian alchemical traditions. Now, the thing is, you were talking about Jung, and you were talking about Velikovsky, and all of the battle for defining what archetypes really ultimately are. And what interests me is that in the alt stream, we get sometimes such that Rick can speak to this very directly. We get such almost violent reaction from people who want to hold on to the mystery rather than solve it. I'd be interested to hear if you had any theories as to A, why people do that, or B, how we can help them with this cosmology escape that kind of man-candid amnesia trap that has happened that Velikovsky illuminated, and then later Graham Hancock has really talked about.
That is well put, Raymond.
Thank you.
Yeah, like that's deep, because I have I get the same reactions from people. That's why I think it's very important to for where we are right now. I think that Gunnar Heinsohn's 10th century AD collapse is relevant to where we are right now. That we don't need the trauma that the Bronze Age people had. It was their trauma, and it seems like a lot was going on, and the skies were different. I don't disagree with that, but for where we are right now, it seems like the trauma from 1,000 years ago is why we're screwed up right now, which has nothing to do actually with the ancient archetypes. It has to do with why was Europe through Rome, through Asia Minor, into Iraq, and all the way over in the Americas, and all the way over in China, furry, covered in soot, ash, dark earth, etc. It's like we're just digging our way out from that period, from the Renaissance, like moving forward. That would, to me, be the component as to why we're, psychologically screwed up right now. Not even so much the Bronze Age, because we're not right now, at least at this point, we're not committing child sacrifices or human sacrifices. I hope not, but we are behaving very violent. We've seen there's videos with these drug cartels, and they'll just take out a chainsaw and cut somebody's head off. Well, that's pretty violent, but it has nothing to do with our religious rites, ceremonies, if you will. Taking somebody up to the high places and like cutting their hearts out like the ancient Mesoamericans were doing, scalping somebody's head, like the ancient, like the Native Americans were doing, or like the Catholic Inquisitions. That stuff is right in front of us. The Catholic Inquisitions, scalpings, things of that nature, right there. So I think that his work explains some of the psychological issues we have right now, and to look back at that, to even get people to look at that, it might freak them out. Some people I know freaked out. But then the ancient archetypes is a whole nother thing, man. It still leads up to where we are today. I don't think we still ever got over it totally as a human family at all. But I think there's always going to be pushback from these ideas because people, like you said, they like the mystery. Some people within the Thunderbolts group would say people like to be lied to. Being lied to feels better than somebody telling us the truth.
They're secure in a comfy little lie world, little Disney world. That makes them secure.
Yeah, like it keeps us in a place where we may feel comfortable of not talking about the archetypes and disasters and human behavior. It's uncomfortable for some people because we're in denial about these things. I think that's what it all comes down to. So if Gunnar Heinsohn is right about a 10th century AD collapse, we're in denial. We're in deep denial about them. If then, Velikovsky and Talbot and those guys are right about the ancient archetypes, they were in denial, and we're still in denial about that too. We're just in denial.
Well, totally. I mean, with Fomenko, of course, Gunnar Heinsohn sort of, he followed Fomenko a little of the way, but Fomenko went further than Gunnar Heinsohn with his rearrangement of chronology. A lot of it is very interesting, and I suppose you could only prove it statistically.
Right.
How close these lineages of kings were, how many times did each sequence occur in not in parallel but in a sequence coming from the east to the west. It seems that these 300 years kind of repeated, these 300-year sequences kind of repeated in the literature, and so certain authors now are coming out as being very dubious as to the provenance. For example, Plato, and then you've got Plotinus, who was a Neoplatonist. It's like 300 years later they revived Plato, and it obviously didn't happen. It was probably the same person. But then there was also another one who was a Plato. So there were three Platos spread over 600 years, they reckon. So it seems to this could be unravelled. Then even getting dates onto things becomes more and more meaningless, doesn't it? Unless you say how many years ago.
Well, you look at you're English. Last night there was a huge boxing event at Wimbledon, and Tyson Fury won. And when I watch boxing, I cannot help but think of the sumo paper I did. And you have the raised platform; it's square, which reminds me of the platform pyramid mounds of Mesoamerica and North America, and China and various places around the world. And it reminds me of the dohyo, which the sumo get on. And you look at the sumo tradition, there is no way. So the official sumo tradition is since the roughly 1400s, but really as a sport, not but 300 to 400 years old, maybe. However, when you look at it, all the motifs are there. They're most assuredly there. The very name of the clothing, the name of the moves, the name of the characters, the fact that the Japanese revere them as gods, living gods, all beckons back to an ancient Shinto tradition. Robert Hawthorne Jr. has been doing work that has to do with the samurai sword and the various features on the samurai sword, and various electrical formations on that. I keep pushing him to produce a paper about all this stuff that he sends me personally. And all this stuff, you look at it, you reckon, gosh, they could have been passing this stuff down for 3,000 years, and there would be hardly any record of it in some ways because of the fact that the destruction, burnings, war, disease, people lose things, right? They'll throw a sword in the lake. I wonder, they found multiple little kids have found swords that have been thrown into the lake, sort of a Arthurian, weird Arthurian tradition that didn't exist originally because it's the Romantics. But the people are throwing swords in the lake, and you got to wonder how often that kind of thing has happened in the past, and how much of this are we, passing along, and then the misremembering. When you look at the Wonder Woman movie, when you look at Shang-Chi, you look at the Thor movie, how much of it is misremembered? It's mistold. It's passed along. It's like the names are familiar, but they're all rearranged situation. And how long have we been doing that? That we can reliably estimate.
Forever.
Eventually, the dates get fuzzy. They just plain get fuzzy.
I mean, look at Norse mythology is more recent,
right?
But
it's
you
really
have Asgard, and you have the serpent in the garden is in that. I can't pronounce the name of the serpent being, if you will.
Yggdrasil.
And then you have the Ashkenabla story. Sounds a lot like Adam and Eve's story, but this is more recent than some of the old stuff. And it's like, well, why is that? You know what I'm saying? In a retelling stories,
because that story is almost an exact analog. Like the battle between the Aesir and the Vanir is almost exactly the same story as the Gita
and the Titans.
Yeah. Just again, I think people are uncomfortable talking about this stuff. We're not uncomfortable talking about it. A lot of other people are uncomfortable talking about it. And
right. So how do we fix that? Do you think?
Well, no, I mean, it's academic work, isn't it? This is academic work. This isn't it's academic work, and I think we're treating it as such, not treating it any other way. And it's maybe to introduce it as academic work, and people have
I reckon if we
too.
got say 5 or 6 of these of the earliest documents we can find, there's a Finnish one, there's the
Kalevala,
the Erlinder, there's the Jewish one, there's the Chinese ones. They've all got if they've got any written creation myths, let's compare them word for word, symbol for symbol, and see what pops out of that. Because there are so many similarities, and we'll be able to maybe measure the depth of similarity in some of the stories, and maybe might lead us to some more certain conclusions, or prompt us to new research.
I feel fairly certain that the 4th iteration of EPMC is going to require me to do deep dive into the Upanishads and Rig Veda. I went through the Zoroastrian stuff. Rick found the best stuff, to be honest with you. But There is so much of that, though, that may exist that the mainstream sumerologists don't want to let the public in on. Like they've translated, but it's sort of a dusty PhD thesis, and that makes me curious as to what they're really finding. That'd be one thing, and then two, of course, what's the most reliable translation? So we are in this woke age where kind of changing the names and the meaning of things is becoming like a normal mainstream thing to do. So what era do we pull from? Do we pull from I don't think we could trust the Victorians, but certainly at least they weren't politically correct. And at the same time, if we get too into the new age, then we get a lot of very fluffy kind of ideas introduced that don't exist. I've covered this with the Taoist translations. There are some Taoist translations where there is practically new age texts. So how do we do it is another issue. But we have I took Dave Talbot's work and put the Saturn myth into a spreadsheet. Do we continue that tradition? Do we just try to keep finding things and inserting them into one giant spreadsheet for comparison, and then insert comments with citation links? Exactly how do we go about this kind of library approach? Sort of a Neo Velikovsky. The man did something very admirable, but it was also him and his wife for 28 years, and all of us have already lives going on. So how do we become more efficient than he was, and still accomplish just as much and be able to the point where we can make predictions?
Well, we have ontologies. Right, I'm not really clear on this area of philosophy. I'll have to swat it. But we have ontologies and then epistemologies, don't we? And then we have layers of information about particular subjects, and then of course we can find which objects relate to which subjects, and which objects relate to each other. And before we start hanging these on a time ladder, like exactly what Scolari did. They just filled this missing 1,000 years in of time, basically. We can use a more Bayesian systematic approach. So if we've got every item of data going in a kind of, in a form kind of process, or if we can search through documents and use a little program to make semantic sense out of sentences. It's just a matter of collecting these words and relate, and how many times they occur, what they mean, and how they relate to, how each document relates to the next one, score how closely they relate, on certain aspects.
So we need a standard. What you're saying is we need a standard for comparison. So, for example, if we were to we need a multi-layer scoring system, because if we were to compare the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, and the Enki in the World Order, for example, we need a way of showing their intrinsic agreement as well as their extrinsic agreement with, say, Egyptian texts or Jewish or Zoroastrian texts.
Yes, I agree. And then if you were to say look up Venus, well, just put Venus in. It could probably give you the links to otherwise named Inanna, and then a list of otherwise names, and right. then a list of texts where these names appear, and in what context, who they're related to, blah de blah, what they do.
Right.
It's all that. And if we could do that for just about every area of every new area of research we can find, we'd soon have enough. And to all through video and books, like I say, with a little bot, that's the way to go with that.
Sure.
I think that'd prepare. Yeah.
The spreadsheet easily make a database from that, and then also what's neat about the spreadsheet, if it was a Google sheet or whatever, you can fill in the cells with direct links to individual documents or individual sites.
Absolutely.
And on those documents, let's say we had one that was called Venus. Well, there would be like a series of cells called Venus, and then inside that we'd have different cultures, and then when you click that, it would go to their document, and then that document, it would have all the different names of that are in that culture and various stories that are specific, with cross links that would go to other cultures potentially.
That's right. Referenced, yeah, cross reference.
Yeah, reference. And then by the end of that, that entire framework could be stuck into some system that unfortunately is something like what Gateway 2 was, but less bogged down with the whole social aspect of it, and make it more driven by the research part. And then long term, we would have a Gateway. We would have a Gateway 4 that could actually just be embedded into the current gateway, and it would be searchable between the two, right? There would be a way to embed all of it. So
well, I think potentially you've got a knowledge base then that if you could say, right, give me images, for classical images for Venus from a certain date, and where was Venus in the sky at such and such a time, and anything will just, you'll just be able to have the interface to be able to present that data pretty fast.
How nice would it be to have a plugin that if you clicked on a date associated with the Venus of Willendorf doll, then the star map was right there, and it rewound itself right to that period of time, to where you could get a decent look at the skies to see if the shape of the pipe matches the shape of the constellations in the sky. And you start to see correlations that overlap that help you to understand what the people back then were actually looking at, and why would they base it on that. And of course, they're only remembering it how they remember it. All the kids today, they see Thor as carrying this square hammer, but when you go and you look, right, the actual in the Neo-Druidic and other traditions over there, Teutonic traditions, the shape of Mjolnir is completely different. And, is that an ancient original Mjolnir, or is that actually also a replacement, based on some constellation or implement of warfare that was popular in the Dark and Middle Ages?
Well,
because maybe the original Mjolnir was completely different.
The original Mjolnir kind of looks like Stormbreaker, sorta.
Right. Correct. Yes, it's much more like the all the Chinese halberd stuff, all of the plasmaglyphic kind of shapes. And yet that's not what the Teutonic magic people wear. And of course, that's not at all what it looks like in the Marvel. So people evolve things, and it would be interesting to be able to see how it evolved. And that doesn't invalidate the comparative mythology. It just makes it richer, in my opinion.
I can tell you how Mjolnir got to be a rectangle. That's Marvel's doing.
That's who's doing? I'm sorry, did you say
Marvel?
Kirby?
Marvel.
Oh, well, yeah, we know that. But, we got to think about this gateway in terms of over the next 1,000 years, assuming the internet even can make it that far. And if we have a tradition and if we're the bards of today, we're passing on that tradition, we have to think of a way to give them more, give them a leg up, because what they did to Yolo Morgan's legacy and Rafinesque here in Lexington from Transylvania University, they're always going to do that, right? So we have to be able to give them an arm and a leg, up, to be able to have that argument on hand. It's great that we know. It boggles my mind how much Sean knows from the Egyptian. I just find it fascinating. Every time he's on, when I'm asking Egyptian questions, and yet, unfortunately, that's a one generation thing. That's a one person per generation talent that, only a few thousand people in the whole planet will have that talent. We've got to find a leveraged, an engineered way, mimsically speaking, to provide this information for the long haul through the ages, Because obviously the mainstream is not going to put this in crystal memory and lock it away in the vaults, at least not for the public. They might for themselves, but I don't think that they're going to do it, and leave Stones up in the middle of Georgia again, telling the truth about the ancient history. And we've all fought hard in our lives to come by some semblance of the truth. And so I'd like to engineer a way to keep that truth alive, so to speak. Just speaking whimsically. This has been a very excellent show. We could either keep it going or stop it here. I don't know what people are up to or doing at the moment.
Well, I'd just like to ask Sean if he's got any views on any of these techniques, information techniques. Have you got any? Or Richard as well. What are your views on that?
It's something that has to be done, I think, because there's more to this stuff, and there's more to be sorted out. I haven't particularly been writing anything or taking any notes or making any outlines probably 2 years now, at least. I just pulled an outline out yesterday. Dated. Let me see. Hold on a second.
Is there a reason for that? Like, have you just been disheartened?
No, it's
saying
just
stuff everybody's disheartened by?
No, just through the whole COVID stuff and everything. I just kind of put things on hold and more or less just entertaining myself with my records and DJing and stuff like that.
Okay.
That's some of my other interests, because I'm even in the process of starting a Twitch channel just for my music. I have some friends that have been.
You think during the lockdown you would have done less DJing and more,
Yeah, well, DJing just to entertain myself. I'll just set my stuff outside, and I kind of, because I guess the conference a couple of years ago was canceled and stuff, so I just said, well, I'll get back to this stuff here. I'm not saying I haven't been reading or anything like that, but
sure,
I expressed myself about some of these things. I still talk to Michael Armstrong, and I said,
oh, how is he?
He's doing good. I mean, he's still hanging in there. He's 80.
Yeah, wow, I haven't heard that name.
Nonetheless,
yeah.
I bring up my contentions with, which I'm allowed. I mean, of where I might have some disagreement with Talbot's overall view of things.
Mm-hmm.
He did get some unpublished manuscripts from Velikovsky. Well, what a great head start, if you will, to his work.
Sure.
But I don't know if these things of the Saturn and Jupiter myths should have been integrated, or what Velikovsky's entire plan was with Saturn and Jupiter. But now it's like, okay, we still have to look at these ancient people, and just like I brought up the Egyptian Amdawat, I'm convinced that there may be that Saturn has something to do with it, but I don't think this story is primarily dealing with Saturn, not this particular snapshot. It looks like this snapshot's dealing with Jupiter and not Saturn at all. And that's something, because he doesn't cite this work either. In Talbot's work, he's not using this particular part of the puzzle. So I'm like, well, how does this piece of the puzzle fit in? Like, you know what I'm saying? It looks like there's more integration that needs to be done, and not everything is set in stone. So there's more room for our understanding, and we have to kind of incorporate things together better so that they kind of fit tighter. I've heard some of the stuff you were talking about. I didn't have any disagreements with what you were talking about the other day with different gas giants. I mean, there's a lot to consider. Are we ever going to get it perfect? Maybe not.
Probably not. Based on my research, the three body formation is more or less chaotic. There's no way of knowing because there's no regular orbit.
Right. My goodness.
Not in a gravitational system, no. I mean, it's more possible probably in
well, it certainly started off simple with the owl motif, right? The mutual opposition but attraction between them, and the double layers that form. But once Neptune formed, which we now have the Nazca so-called meme cat, which is not even Nazca, it's not a cat and it's not a meme in the internet sense of the word. But once that formation happened, at that point you're going to have some serious situation. And at what point does Earth go from revolving around Shamash and the entirety of that three body to revolving just around Proto-Saturn? and then eventually getting stolen and revolving around Jupiter. And at some point, being so close to Neptune that people thought that the sea god was the main lord.
Right.
You know, it's a lot to work out for sure. And then at some point, you know, the planet Uranus, which I reckon is Hades, but it's some kind of invasive, like some point shows up and is now. You go from having 3 of these Maltese crosses in the Chinese glyphs to suddenly there's 4, and the same thing at Sardinia. So why does that happen? And Malta, when did that happen? And what precipitated it? Did it come with the sun? Did we approach it? I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't have any answers.
I think Hades is a place, not a thing.
Maybe
yeah,
so.
I do as well.
And I
maybe
believe
so.
Hades to be the outer solar system. You know,
Either
the
way, you
area
still
of
have
space
3
far,
crosses.
far away from the Earth.
You have 3 crosses, and you have 3 types of eggs with the different diameter ratio eggs. Okay, and then suddenly everywhere there's a tetragrammaton. You know, and there's 4, and there's the 3 sibling males and the 1 female, which we all have talked about before. That Kronos becomes female once he's castrated. And later, with the diadems, is replaced and becomes Hera. And then here you have Heracles, and you have Mars, and that explains Mars's love inclination. So
and the 1 begets the 2, and the 2 begets the so on.
Yeah.
And these have a time sequence as well, you see, and also Athena was a late addition to the Greek pantheon. Poseidon came from a different. Well, he was Lord of Atlantis, wasn't he? So he came from a different sort of background. I believe Artemis was a maybe Persian kind of entity from far further east. So these came together and at some point the Pelasgians were calling the king Saturn, weren't they? And the queen, well, they were calling various princes were Saturn, and then other ones were Mars, like the Jack would be Mars. You'd have an equivalent deities, I believe, in Egypt, but there were fights going on as well between the Pelasgian Saturn deity and the Egyptian Osiris, I believe. Now, so were these talking about some warfare that was happening? Probably. But I think we can, if we can get more and more of these little factlets together with some kind of a provenance, and then take those back to the original documents that we can find, where this information originated. If we can do that, and then we'll gain a lot of information. I think we'll gain insights and information. On whatever your research line might be, because if we all just put these little factlets down when we come across them, like thousands and thousands of them an hour probably when you're reading some stuff, or find a way to fill this fact database quickly, I think it'd be a real worthwhile thing to do. I don't know. Maybe there'd be a commercial possibility somewhere in there. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, though. Certainly. For the people who are working on it, I think whatever.
I have a question. Where is this video? Where can I see this video, Ramon? Where you broadcasting?
You mean where will this show up?
Yeah.
I'll post the Rumble link in the. We had to move to Rumble because every time you talk about anything real like COVID or the election fraud or anything like that, then they censor the whole show. Not that section. They censor the whole show. And I got tired of the strikes, so I'm moving to Rumble. Sometimes Buddy likes to take a show when he's on it. He likes to take it and turn it into a geometric view. Okay. But I've moved the show. I may put this whole show up on the YouTube anyways. It's just a warning to let people. In fact, I will, and I'll just people. We're on Rumble now, so you need to go to Rumble.
Right.
Leave a link to the Rumble in the
Sounds good.
YouTube description. But this is your last chance.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely then talk to my friend. Well, I can get in touch with Adair. I don't know if he's gonna be willing to step for again. We'll see.
All
I
right.
think I think I can
You
probably
do it or
set
not
that
do it.
up.
I don't care either way per se.
Yeah.
But
Let's see what I can
um,
do.
if he thinks that there's nobody out there that can talk about stuff on, then he's not correct. He's not correct. But but then again, I would prefer, and hopefully you'd listen to this far. I would prefer a dialogue and a discussion that involved me talking about my history, why I moved from the mainstream to the alt stream, because there's an important point in that I understand your mainstream and I understand the alt stream, and I'm very critical of the alt stream. There's a lot of the alt stream I cannot stand, and he needs to understand that we are not flat Earth. We are not into this stuff. We have a derived lineage that is older than his mainstream. Period.
Right.
So,
Because I'm gonna get going soon. My Bluetooth is gonna die.
I understand. Well, I just discovered that it's quite possible that all of the cake or pancake in my MetaMask account has disappeared while I'm on call here. I went to compound it, and I don't know if it means it's been stolen or if there's a bug, but it's just not there. And I'm sitting there going, what the actual, what?
Yeah.
So who knows? We do live in the age of thievery and lies. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. It would be kind of a pain in the butt on account of, it was several thousands I was using to try and compound to create a college account for my kids, but I wouldn't be surprised if the entire pancake swap turned out to be just another fake Ponzi thing that they couldn't support, so they went in and stole everyone's cake and to cover their debts. I mean, that's quite possible that they built a backdoor in like that. It's supposed to be proof of stake. So, anyways, I've written my think tank to find out if anybody else has had the same problem. It could be a bug, but I'm looking at my MetaMask and I can see other things in my wallet. So I have no idea. I really don't. What a world. What a world. Anyways, I guess I will stop the recording, make this the